Tell us where we are on religious freedom and what needs to be done during this election season on that subject.
Well, this is one of the recurring cycles in American history of know-nothingism, nativism. It's been every couple of generations, I suppose, it comes out. You know, the anti-Catholic know-nothing party of the 1850s. The Pope was going to invade. Even in the 1870s, you look at Thomas Nest's cartoons about Tammany Hall. They're all, alligators or crocodiles wearing bishop's mitres. The Catholics are going to take over. And then the anti-Chinese exclusions. And then the terrible discrimination against Jews and Italians and Greeks and Eastern Europeans in the 1920s. We passed a terrible immigration law in 1924, which excluded people on the basis of national origin. And the Almanac of American Politics, in its description of my district, says that had a nativist, anti-Semitic, racist Congress not passed that law, maybe 2 million of the 6 million Jews who died in the Holocaust would have been in the United States instead. And we continue this with the Japanese internments, and that's part of our civil liberties backlash every time there's a war also. But it's exclusive. I don't know. We didn't do that to the Germans and Italians here. We just did it to the Japanese, although we were at war with all three of them. So this is in the same tradition of nativist hatred, which comes up every so often, and unfortunately Mr. Trump is exploiting that and generating it to a large extent. Now, from a church-state point of view, obviously, it's even worse. It's one thing, it's bad enough to say that we don't like Japanese, or we don't like Chinese, or we don't like Eastern European Jews, or some ethnic group. It's even worse when you start saying we want to exclude Muslims or Christians, or on a religious basis. It goes directly against the First Amendment. And by the way, in one respect, there's a provision in the Constitution that says there shall not be a religious test for office. Now, that's for office, but the spirit is obviously you shouldn't have a religious test for anything. And to say on immigration that we're going to exclude Muslims is flatly unconstitutional. You cannot discriminate on the basis of religion. So now Mr. Trump is saying, well, we'll exclude people from Muslim-dominated areas. And constitutionally, he might get away with that. But it's wrong. It's completely wrong. And the United States always recovers from these. We do a lot of damage, we hurt a lot of people, but eventually we usually apologize. About 30 years later.
If the Democratic candidates win the presidency and the vice presidency, and you have an opportunity to talk with President-elect Clinton at that point, what counsel would you give her about religious freedom and church-state separation and where we are on that?
Well, let me come back first to this religious exclusion and the immigration. What counsel I would give her depends on who controls Congress. I mean, if the Democrats control Congress, which might happen even in the House, depending on if she wins big, God willing, then you pass an intelligent, comprehensive immigration reform along the lines of what the Senate passed. Was it 3 years ago? The details can vary, but something you have to have a limit on immigration, obviously, but you have due process protections. You have criteria for preference or treatment. You try to secure the borders, which we've been doing very effectively. What people don't realize, Trump keeps yelling about the immigration from Mexico, the illegal immigration from Mexico. Right now, for the last 2 years, there's been a net outflow. There are more people going from the United States to Mexico than from Mexico to the United States. He's talking about a past tense problem, in effect. But and you have a decent immigrant, and you gradually legalize the people who are here. You have a pathway to citizenship. I mean, what we know to do what to do. If there's a Republican Congress, you'll have a standoff. I mean, I don't know. In terms of separation of church and state, you have to reinvigorate separation. There have been a number of measures which I think invade that, which my counsel would be to quietly go a reverse course on. You can't, the basic thing is people have to have religious freedom, but government can't support religion, period. And that's your basic two principles. Now, let me say one other thing. There's a distortion of religious freedom that the Republicans, conservatives generally are pushing. And this is key. as a result of some of the Supreme Court decisions on gay rights and marriage equality, people with a strongly held religious belief should have the religious freedom not to do various things, or basically to discriminate against gay people. Well, that's wrong. You always have to look at religious freedom like any other freedom. Number one, it's not absolute, but number two, it's a freedom until you're affecting somebody else. I have an absolute freedom to wave my hand in the air, but that freedom stops in front of your nose.
Right.
I can't hit you in the nose. That's not a freedom. That's an invasion of your freedom, of your rights. And the same thing goes for religious freedom. Religious freedom is a shield, not a sword. It's one thing to say you have the freedom to practice your religion, and you ought to. It's another thing to say that you can use your religion to deprive a third party, someone else, of rights. And that's not right. Now, in some instances, we make accommodations for that in the Civil Rights Act and certain things for small businesses. But as a basic rule, you do not have the freedom to say, I won't serve black people in my restaurant because my religion says black people shouldn't eat in white restaurants. Nor do you have the religious freedom to say, I won't serve gay people in my restaurant because my religious belief says we shouldn't serve gay people. Nor do you have the religious freedom to say, as an employer, my employees shouldn't have access to abortion services or to a contraception because my religion objects to that. If your religion objects to it, don't do it, but not for them.
You have been a hero for many of us on this subject. We appreciate so much what you've done.
Thank you.
Can you give me, just because I was going to ask you about the distortion, your most succinct definition of religious freedom?
The most succinct definition of religious freedom is you ought to have the freedom to do whatever you want until it negatively impacts somebody else, and then you do not have that freedom. There may be a balancing test or whatever, but you don't have an absolute right to do something that will hurt somebody else. And some of that's controversial right now when you say you don't have the absolute freedom to deny contraception services. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, what if your religious freedom said, my insurance health coverage that I provide to my employees will not cover blood transfusions. Let them die on the operating table. Most people would be horrified at that. Right. They're not horrified at some of the other things just because they regard it differently, but it's the same principle.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay.